West Virginia Democratic Senator Joe Manchin made it clear he is not running for re-election in 2024. Here's the announcement he put out on social media.
I got into politics because of an argument I had 40 years ago with my dad. John Manchin owned a furniture store in Farmington, West Virginia, a small coal mining town of hard-working people. And one day our local state representative came in and asked Dad for a favor, saying, "You owe me for all the things I've done for your little town." When the man left, I turned to my dad and said, "Now wait a minute, isn't helping Farmington that man's job?" That moment defined the difference between self-service and public service. When I told my dad that I was going to run for office, he said, "Oh, Joe, politics is a bad business. I'm telling you right now, stay out of it." I didn't disagree that often with my father, but that time I did. I reminded him of the famous line from President John F. Kennedy's inaugural address, "Ask not what your country can do for you. Ask what you can do for your country." I was 13 when I first heard it, and I'm still inspired today by it. My family were devoted Catholics who immigrated from Italy and Czechoslovakia. So to us, President Kennedy was held in the highest regard, and I knew President Kennedy's words would sway my dad. It took him about a minute, but my dad said that he would support me running if I made a vow to serve all the people, friend or foe, and not just myself. That promise made to my dad all those years ago has been my guiding light. I've never cared about where good ideas came from, and I never blame one side for creating a problem, nor believed that only one side could fix them. When America is at her best, we get things done by putting country before party, working across the aisle, and finding common ground. Many times, this approach has landed me in hot water, but the fight to unite has been well worth it. Today, West Virginia is attracting more investment, opportunity, and jobs than it has in decades. Here at home and across the country, we are building more roads, bridges, manufacturing plants, and energy infrastructure than almost any time in America's history. After months of deliberation and long conversation with my family, I believe in my heart of hearts that I have accomplished what I set out to do for West Virginia. I have made one of the toughest decisions of my life and decided that I will not be running for re-election to the United States Senate. But what I will be doing is traveling the country and speaking out to see if there is an interest in creating a movement to mobilize the middle and bring Americans together. To the West Virginians who have put their trust in me and fought side by side to make our state better, it has been my honor of my life to serve you. Thank you. Every incentive in Washington is designed to make our politics extreme. The growing divide between Democrats and Republicans is paralyzing Congress and worsening our nation's problems. The majority of Americans are just plain worn out. Our economy is not working for many Americans, from the rising cost of food and fuel and everything in between. We have a border crisis with illegal drugs entering our country and killing Americans every day. Our national debt is out of control, and Americans don't feel safe, even in their own communities. We are providing critical aid to two of our allies, fighting wars for their survival, and we must prevent being pulled into a major war ourselves. These are not Republican or Democratic challenges. These are American challenges. They affect every one of us, and we need to face them together. I know our country isn't as divided as Washington wants us to believe. We share common values of family, freedom, democracy, dignity, and a belief that together we can overcome any challenge. We need to take back America and not let this divisive hatred further pull us apart. Public service has and continues to drive me every day. That is the vow that I made to my father over 40 years ago, and I intend to keep that vow until my dying day. May God bless America, the great state of West Virginia, and each and every one of you.
Manchin has been the only Democrat elected to statewide office in West Virginia. This allows Republicans to pick up a seat in the heavily GOP state. Here is a spoiler alert. Maserati Manchin. Ain't nobody coming to see you, Otis. Don't nobody have no kind of appetite for no 76-year-old man talking about he is somewhere in the middle when you are definitely more so on the radical conservative side of what you're trying to call Democrat, but we don't believe you. So you can save the whole tour. Ain't nobody coming to see you, Otis. And buy as she. Don't let the good Lord hit you or the good Lord split you, because don't nobody care about you leaving. the doggone Senate. But what I'm trying to figure out is who is paying you to embark on this little tour, because I know don't nobody think you can win. I know don't nobody think that you could beat Joe Biden or Donald Trump. Lauren, I'm gonna start with you. What do you think is really behind this push by Joe Manchin to look for people who are so-called looking at the middle?
There's probably some corporate actor behind there that has something to do with the coal industry, knowing Manchin. I mean, everything with him is the coal industry and stopping renewable energy, stopping anything that would assist with climate change. I mean, that's been his entire career. That's what he cares about. I love this idea that somehow we need, Joe Manchin to lead us through the storm into a more moderate America. It is completely ridiculous. It does give the Democratic Party a huge challenge with regard to winning that seat, which is probably not going to happen, quite frankly. So they're going to have to look elsewhere on the map. But this idea that, I love the part in there about the divisive hatred in our country or something, and then you don't mention Donald Trump. You don't have the guts in the moment that you're resigning, you're not resigning, but retiring, announcing that you're not running for re-election. You don't have the guts to mention Donald Trump. Now, we have seen people like Arnold Schwarzenegger and Robert De Niro get on social media and talk about politics and talk about Donald Trump and talk about fascism. These are movie actors.
Yeah.
Okay. Of course, Schwarzenegger was the governor of California. They have the guts to say it, but a United States senator can't say it. I mean, you got to be kidding me with this guy. It is really interesting, though, that he thinks he's the hero. He's going to save us. Okay, we'll see.
Yeah, he thinks he's the hero, but he's more like the villain, because he's the one who stood in the way of the child tax credit being extended. Him, along with Sinema, stood in the way of, changing the filibuster so that we could pass the John Lewis Voting Rights Act, pass a number of bills. And so, yeah, he's definitely not the hero of anybody's story, except for in his own head. Teresa, this is, like I said, the person that blocked the child tax credit. What exactly does Joe Manchin think that he is moderate in, other than not agreeing with everything that the Democrats are trying to do?
I think that is, that's a great question, but I think that's also the new definition of what moderate is. Right now, we have, obviously the progressive movement. We have, organizations called No Labels, so everybody's trying to figure out where they fit in, because it looks like, Democrats are not unified, but we just had a past election where it looks like we're absolutely energized, we're actually absolutely recharged in battleground states. And so I think there's, a moment here for Joe Manchin, to think like everybody else is thinking. President Joe Biden is in his 80s. And these folks who have served in public service for decades are now seeing, this is kind of like their last will and testament on their way out the door in public service. But we cannot get confused. And I think when Joe Manchin does decide, if he is deciding to go to seek higher office, I think that'll be an interesting conversation, because if we start looking at the record does say you're not for working people. The record does say that when it was time for us to fix civil rights and also protect our rights, Joe Manchin wasn't at the table. If anything, he was the individual that stood against those protections. And I think, people, once that record is probably, just rehashed, we'll start also getting an understanding that, he's not the one that we should be selecting for any other office. But we hope he does take, the necessary break he needs to really think about his actions.
Yeah. I mean, listen, I'm not ageist or anything, but 76 ain't no spring chicken either. That's what Joe Manchin is. So I don't have a problem with Joe Biden being 80, whoever being whatever age, but I always think it's interesting when the age conversation happens with a whole bunch of other old people trying to run. Jill Stein just announced today that she's running. She's 73. I'm not saying 73 is as old as 80, because, I mean, just numerically it's not. But we're not talking about, somebody in their 30s or 40s, Pete Buttigieg age or AOC's age running for president. We talk about a bunch of septuagenarians still trying to get out there and talk about they're going to be the change that Joe Biden isn't, I guess. Dr. Carr, what's your reaction to Maserati Manchin talking about he's not running, but he's not sitting down somewhere either?
That's right. I mean, well, I think it's the same as Teresa's and as Lauren's and as yours, Reese. Joe Manchin is the definition of a slick politician. he's going to be just fine. In a Republican administration, he'll be given a cabinet post or an ambassadorship. Maybe they make him Secretary of Energy so he can get his coal buddies together, because, you know, there's a real war going on between the energy companies now. You see Chevron and Exxon and BP, the European oil companies energy companies trying to go around and deal with renewables, while some of these others here in the U.S. are trying to retrench and double down on coal and oil. Well, you know, cosplay coal miner is backed by billionaires. Joe Manchin is going to run for president. But the problem we have, of course, is that black folk who have made the involuntary sacrifice since they snatched us into this criminal enterprise are being set up for another round of pain. We see Biden's numbers. I mean, these polls don't mean much, but we do have, you mentioned Jill Stein, in the four-way, you know, the CNN poll that we all saw, you know, saying that Trump beats Biden, but in a four-way race, how in the hell does 16% of the people say they'll vote for Robert F. Kennedy Jr. and 4% for Cornel West? Well, they have to get on the ballot. But ultimately, Jill Stein, if she's the Green Party candidate, since Cornel couldn't stand still long enough to understand you need a party apparatus to get on the ballot, Jill Stein jumps in, and who knows? I guess what I'm saying is ultimately Joe Manchin is put his hand up, backed by all the billionaires necessary, to say, I will be the spoiler.
Yeah.
I'll be the one. What's in it for me? If the Democrats win, well, what the hell? We'll find some lobbyist job for you. And if the white nationalists get in, we'll make you put you in the cabinet, or we'll give you an ambassadorship. This is all about what it's always been about with Joe Manchin. Joe Manchin.